Hello, Packers fans, wherever you may be. It's time for another edition of the Pack Attack Cast. It is Victory Friday. No matter where you are, if you celebrate Thanksgiving or if you're in another part of the world where there is no Thanksgiving, we have to give thanks today for a great Packer victory yesterday. We talked a lot about the keys to the game for this game, and for the most part, the Green Bay Packers on offense and defense delivered. And we'll talk about why this victory came to be and why it is so important for your Green Bay Packers. Everything that they want is right in front of them right now for getting the win of the division and getting a top seed in the playoffs due to an incredible game. First off, I want to give my hat off to the Lions. They had a great game where they gave everything they could. They were shorthanded. They were tired after an overtime game, which they quite frankly should have lost last week. And that kind of told me that the Lions were set up for a loss in this game after they almost lost to the Giants. And with respect to the Giants, the Packers are just a much better team top to bottom. But the Lions played with a lot of heart. They fought very hard, and it actually makes me feel better. I can say that now that the Packers won, that they got the best version of the Lions in this game, or close to it, because it really shows the Green Bay Packers can play a complete game, and this is the type of team and complete effort that will get you a win deep into the playoffs and maybe into the Super Bowl. So, like I said, everything's in front of the Packers right now. If the Packers had played like they played yesterday, they would have beaten the Eagles when they lost to the Eagles by 3 points. No question about it. And the good news for the Packers, and we'll talk about injuries down the road because there were some major injury notes we have to cover. But overall, the Green Bay Packers roster has the potential to get much better before we get to the playoffs, barring any more significant injuries. Obviously, injuries happen, and the loss of Watt for the rest of the season is a significant loss. But you know what? Every team in the NFL is going to lose players between now and the Super Bowl. There's no way around it. Players are going to get hurt. It's having that depth on your team, thanks to a great GM in Brian Gutekunst, that really helps the Packers push through all these injury issues. And we're going to talk about the injury issues a little later. But let's talk about keys to the game for this victory Friday. The Packers played possibly their best game of the year. I know a lot of people will point to week 1 and maybe week 2 and say that was the best game of the year for the Packers. But I would argue the Lions weren't in full beast mode at their full potential in week 1. They were still struggling. They had a lot of players that were shifting into new roles. And same for the Packers. The Packers also had new players like Micah Parsons, who was figuring out his role on the team. But I still think this game was a great game. And I think the Lions probably would have beaten most teams in the NFL, but the Packers rose above and executed at an extremely high level. And let's talk about some of those keys that made that happen. First of all, Jahmyr Gibbs was not allowed to kill us in this game. 2 games in a row, the Packers played Jahmyr Gibbs better than any other team in the NFL. This run defense is legitimate. And knowing that they can manage a player like Jahmyr Gibbs, who I would argue right now is probably the best running back in the league right now as far as his ability to have explosive plays. Jonathan Taylor, you could argue, is more of a bruiser, but as far as full big play potential, you got to go with Jahmyr Gibbs right now. And the fact that they controlled Jahmyr Gibbs. You're not going to shut down a player like Jahmyr Gibbs, but they kept him from getting those huge plays that we saw, for example, against the Giants the week before that kept them in the game against the Giants. Leads me to believe that this defense, now they're going to have to make some adjustments with Watt out probably for the rest of the year, that this defense can stop most running attacks and that make their opponent one-dimensional and force them to make plays against what I would say is the best safety tandem in the NFL. And we have corners that are consistently underrated for the Green Bay Packers. Carrington Valentine, except for one missed tackle on the play that led to the Williams touchdown, I thought had a very solid game. I thought Keyshawn Nixon, who was coming off of an injury, played very solid as well, except for one bonehead penalty on 3rd and 18. But those things are going to happen sometimes. So I think our defense, from the run defense to coverage in the secondary, played extremely well. And we're going to have Quay Walker back probably next week, which is only going to make that defense stronger, because we did have some lapses at linebacker in coverage that I think Quay Walker will help clean up. So big news there. Micah Parsons and the defense held serve against a great offense whose back was against the wall. If you ask honestly in private any of the Lions on offense, I think they would say this was like a playoff game for them. Losing this game for the Lions pretty much knocks them out of a chance of winning the division. And right now, they're a game and a half away from even making it to the playoffs. So this is a huge loss for the Detroit Lions. So I know that they were giving it everything they had. And the defense was able to hold serve and keep those big plays at a minimum in this game. The Detroit Lions did have some big plays in the passing game for sure, but that's to be expected given the talent level on this team. But the Green Bay Packers mitigated that as much as possible and kept their offense in a position to win the game. Next up, let's talk about Jordan Love. Jordan Love may have had the best game of his career in this game. A lot of people like to point to the 2023 game against the Cowboys. I would argue that this game was Jordan Love's best game so far as a professional in the NFL. He was solid. He was composed. He made great plays. He even had lots of plays that were left on the field because of drops or good coverage on the Lions, depending on how you want to look at each play. But Jordan Love played an excellent game today. This is a player that can lead your team to a Super Bowl victory. And Jordan Love is only going to get better. We know he's dealing with an injury to his left shoulder. Hopefully this mini bye will give him almost a week and a half to heal even more. They'll probably give him lots of rest over the mini bye to hopefully get that shoulder back to 100%. But Jordan Love was in command of this game from start to finish. The Green Bay Packers never trailed in this game. As close as it looked and as stressful as it was, and believe me, I was watching this game with nightmares of past Lion games where I go back to that game on Thursday Night Football last year where the Lions won on a field goal at the end of the game. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be another one of those games. But the Packers would not be denied in this game, and Jordan Love was a huge part of that. Jordan Love had the look of a player that was not going to let his team lose in that game, and it showed. I want to give a hat off as well to riverboat gambler Matt LaFleur. Last week in the victory, everybody was complaining that Matt LaFleur was too conservative. He didn't go for the throat. Matt LaFleur left everything out there on the field yesterday. He called a great game. He was extremely aggressive with his fourth down calls. The Packers were I believe 3 for 3 or 4 for 4 on fourth downs. I'll have to double check that. But Matt LaFleur called, not only was he aggressive in his play calling by going for it on fourth down, but he called great plays. And again, there was a lot of plays that were left on the field due to drops or due to great plays by the Lions defense. You can go either way on some of those plays. They were very close. But there were some catches that the Packers should have had. And they were left on the field. But Matt LaFleur combined with Jordan Love is a great combination, because Matt LaFleur is a great play caller, and he showed yesterday he could be aggressive when he needs to win a game. That was quite obvious. So we want to get the best of Matt LaFleur. Sometimes you have to be conservative, like we saw last week, and sometimes you have to be hyper aggressive to win the game. And Matt LaFleur, if he could put that together, is going to make a run at Coach of the Year. Okay? There is plenty of room for Matt LaFleur to get back into the Coach of the Year conversation if they have a good end of the season. I mean, if they go 4-1 the rest of the season, I think Matt LaFleur could be in the Coach of the Year conversation, because he has been very good the last 2 weeks. You might say he was too conservative last week, but you know what? We won the game, and we didn't have any injuries because we were too aggressive. But he really played a great game, called a great game this week. So Matt LaFleur and Jordan Love had great games. Mark Parson played 90% of snaps. He was a monster out there. This is a Super Bowl caliber team. There are very few teams in the NFL that they wouldn't have beaten if they play like that every week. Okay? They knew how important that game was, and hopefully the Green Bay Packers come out of this game. First of all, they've got the bugaboo of the Lions off their chest. Okay, we've swept the Lions. That is huge. The Packers have not swept the Lions since 2020. Okay, that is a huge benchmark for this team, and this team needs to go home, enjoy their mini bye, and know that if they play to their full potential, this is a team that could beat any team in the NFL. No question about it. All those people in the media who are constantly putting the Packers down in the lower top 10 in their power rankings, forget about it. There's no way you could put the Packers lower than the Bears, lower than the Lions anymore. The Packers are a top 5 team, and I think the power rankings next week will reflect that. And they have everything they want ahead of them. This is set up so nicely for them. So let's look ahead. Okay? Let's not forget the loss of Watt in this game. He's probably out for the year. He is signed for next year, and hopefully he'll be ready for week 1 next year. So the Packers are going to have to do defensive line by committee for the rest of the year to offset Watt. Not only do we have the players that I think can do it on the roster right now, but if LVN comes back healthy, and I think he'll be ready for the Bears game. Knock on wood, I do believe LVN will be back for the Bears game. And LVN is a former defensive tackle. You put LVN in the cheetah package, which they used at the start of the season, more and more, LVN should be effective to help reinforce this defensive line. Okay? I think the coaching staff needs to accept that LVN needs to play defensive tackle in rotation the rest of the season. Enigbare is perfectly good as a third defensive end. He played very well yesterday. So you let Micah Parsons, Enigbare, and the rest of the ends cover things. You put Lucas Van Ness in a rotation as a defensive lineman, and I think they can offset the loss of Watt. In addition, there aren't a lot of free agent defensive linemen right now, but there are a few that you could look at and sign right now off the street. Now, they are older defensive linemen, but they can actually be pretty effective as part of a rotation. So look for the Packers to add at least one defensive lineman from free agency right now. Again, they're not going to be as effective as Watt, but it's an extra body that you can use in rotation as defensive linemen. I think they'll do that over the next week so that they can get a player in to practice and get them ramped up to get some snaps in this defense. Okay, let's look at the division now. The Packers are 3-0 in the division. This is huge because it's impossible for the Packers to have a losing record in the division. And I would expect them to go 5-0 through the rest of the division. Worst case, I expect them to split against the Bears. Again, that's worst case. I think they're going to win next week, and they might lose on the road at Chicago. That's a tough place to play. But they are definitely going to win that last game against the Vikings because the Vikings are a shell of what they were last year. So, and that will be the last game of the season. The Packers will probably be playing for the division, and the Vikings will have nothing to play for. So look for the Packers to go probably 5-1 in the division right now by starting 3-0. If they split against the Bears and they beat the Vikings, they'll be 5-1 in the division, and that will lead to a victory in the NFC North, which is always the number one goal for a team. Win your division. That is the number one goal for the Packers. If they win the division, they could be the second or the third seed, in my opinion. I don't think they could go any lower than that because the NFC South is a dumpster fire right now. So look for the Packers to play hard the next couple weeks, win the division, and be the second or third seed. And if they're the second or third seed, that puts them in a position where they're going to have a home playoff game, maybe two. And if they have to go on the road against the number one seed, whether it's the Rams or it's the Eagles, I think the Packers that played last night in Detroit, which is a very hard place to play, can win on the road and possibly get to the Super Bowl. So everything the Packers want is right in front of them. What we need to do is watch the Bears-Eagles game today. If the Bears lose, the Packers are going to be first in the NFC North, and that will be huge for next week, where guess who comes to Lambeau Field? The Bears. The Chicago Bears come to Lambeau Field next week. If the Packers won this game, which they did, and then they win next week against the Bears, okay, they're going to have a 1.5 game lead against the Lions and a 1.5 game lead over the Bears. And that will be huge. Not only that, but the Lions have to play an up-and-coming Cowboys team, which I wouldn't want to play right now. You know, everybody gave the Packers a hard time for tying against the Cowboys. The Cowboys just defeated the Chiefs, and before that, they defeated the Eagles, two teams that were in the Super Bowl. So maybe that tie against the Cowboys looks a little better now. You know, I think the Cowboys are definitely a better team than a lot of people expected. So the Packers have everything in front of them to win the division. All they have to do is hope for a Bears loss today, which I think is extremely likely. And even if the Bears do win, if the Packers beat the Bears next week, they'll still be first in the division. And their pathway to winning this division and being the second or third seed is very clear. So go Pack Go. Enjoy the victory. And we've got a week and a half to get ready for the Bad News Bears to come to Lambeau Field. I believe, and many people believe, that the Bears are frauds. Okay? The Bears have beaten bad teams lately by coming from behind in the last few minutes of the game and winning. They're not going to be able to do that against the Packers. The Packers are going to give the Bears a beat down next week and hopefully in Chicago and show that they truly are the best team in the division. I was hoping they would win the division from start to finish, but they might be in a position where by the end of the season, they're the clear winners of the NFC North and on to a playoff run and hopefully the Super Bowl. Everything is front of this Packers team. If they play like they played yesterday, they can beat any team in the NFL at home or on the road. That was that good of a game. And again, the Lions really are a very solid team that had their backs to the wall and gave the Packers everything they could handle. And the Packers said, "Thank you, sir. May I have another? And let's go on to winning our division." So that's it for today. Watch the Bears-Eagles game very closely. We'll have an update tomorrow as we start to get ready for the Bears. We have a full week of coverage from now until next Sunday, over a week actually, to dissect the Bears and show you how the Green Bay Packers are going to defeat the Bears a week from Sunday. As always, go Pack Go, and we'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Pack Attack Cast. If you haven't hit that sub button, go ahead and hit it. We're very close to 13,000. We just need a few more subs to get there, and we'd love to get to 14 or 15,000 subs by the end of the season. Thank you for all your support. As always, go Pack Go. We'll see you tomorrow.